Well, it's been a while since I've done a Jeep update. Kinda was back on a back burner for a bit with when it's hot outside I don't want to work on it. When it's cold outside I don't want to work on it. I have been working on it here and there though, so I guess it's been a little over 2 years since the fire. So thought I'd show you what's been going on. I guess first things first is that when the fire had originally happened, I was planning on having a shop paint the vehicle. I was going to do the tear down and get it stripped out so it'd be easy for them to paint. I went down and after I'd already purchased everything, get the engine bay all put back together and other things, I went down and talked with the auto body shop to see when I could get it in there. And when I was in there, of course, when I got the quote, this was before COVID, and then after COVID, the quote was nearly twice as much. At that point, I was pretty much tapped out, except for what I had left in there from the original quote. So at that point, I was kind of in a bad situation. So I had to figure out if I wanted to do the work myself. I'm not big on body work. The biggest thing was the rear fenders, which we'll talk about here in a minute. First thing that I did was find a new hood, because this old hood in the fire got hot enough where the metal warped. So it's unfortunate because the hood was actually in really good shape. But I luckily found one that was fairly close. It was originally black, and I went ahead and cleaned it up, painted it. And this hood is not exactly perfect. It does have a few little dings in it, dimples, but it's also a work truck, so I guess if I find a better hood later, that's great. If not, certainly looks better than a burnt hood. This color here that I picked out is about as close as I could get with paint that I can find off the shelf without spending a lot of money on it. If you look on this old hood here, you can see where I was doing some testing. If you look in the center above the burn point there, that's the color that's now on that, and it's pretty close to the original color of the faded original color. So I'm good enough for that. That other one there was way too yellowy, but yeah, we went with that one. And we'll have to see how that goes. And of course, after getting the hood taken care of, once I decided what I was going to do, I had to do the tear down of the Jeep. So at this point, I basically pulled all the wiring, all the interior. I was planning on pulling the motor and sending it over to have some gaskets replaced and all that, just in case they were damaged in the fire. But again, with the finances, we decided we're just gonna put it together, see what happens. If it runs good, then great. If it leaks, well, we'll address that at that point. I can do a lot of that work myself as well. So at that point, I decided I was going to go ahead and try replace the fender flares in the back. So I had originally had these fenders laying around since oh shoot, they've probably been around like something like 10 years, 10, 12 years. I pulled them off out of a salvage yard years ago. They came off like a 66 Jeep pickup. It's about the closest thing as you can find to the original flares on a Cherokee, because either the flares on a Cherokee are totally toast because they were double walled and they created a moisture trap, and they were just known to rust out really quick. So all the aftermarket stuff is gone. People have tried to reproduce them, but nobody's doing anything because it's such a complicated process. Well, had to figure things out. I remember somebody telling me that you have to drill out the spot welds because I had to separate the pickup bed sidewalls from the flares themselves. So I did some research on it. In the process of everything, I found out they make a spot weld remover. So basically it allows you to cut through the one layer of metal without having to drill through both. That way you don't have to fix so many holes. So I got myself a cutter, and I spent a winter basically cutting the panels off and getting them cleaned up and ready to put on the Cherokee. And the main reason why these Jeep pickup flares are in good shape is because the pickup flares were only single walled, which is great because it kind of took away the moisture trap that the Cherokee fenders created. But in any case, I was gonna have them welded in, but I had a auto body shop that just before the fire, they said they would actually replace the fender flares for me at a reasonable price. And then I asked them if they're going to weld them in or if they were going to glue them in, because they had discussed that there's this epoxy that they use a lot on modern cars, and they said, well, yeah, we'll just plan on gluing them in. So I was like, well, maybe that might be a better idea for me as well, because I mean, I'm not that good a welder. Trying to get equipment in some of those tight spots would be a pain, so I went ahead and got the epoxy and the gun to squirt the epoxy out, and it mixes it at the same time. So basically you just squirt this epoxy onto the areas you want to glue together, and then you just kind of put it together. I actually thought it turned out pretty darn good. I mean, I'm kind of new to this. I'm not no body man by any means, but I'm really pleased with how these fenders installed. Of course, this is, the outside. I didn't modify these fenders in any way, putting them in, outside of cutting some sheet metal on the wheel well or the wheelhouse, which is on the inside. You can see the epoxy there, but I still have this issue with this gap here. It's surprisingly, it's pretty close. I'm not disappointed on how close it goes, or how close the curvature is. It's pretty darn close. This was the tricky part, because this is where the gas overflow or relief pipe is. I didn't want to cut or weld around that thing, so I actually left a little tab there, and I epoxied that on there. Of course, that's epoxied as well, but yeah, we'll figure this out. I'm not sure exactly if I'm going to do a weld, or I got a hood that I got some good metal on, so I might just cut some strips and try and make it work out that way. But yeah, really happy with this epoxy because it just seals everything beautifully. And the nice thing with the epoxy is that it does away with the moisture traps that are there. There's like 3 layers of metal here that I'm really surprised it wasn't all rotted out. Luckily the original fender was all rotted out in this area, and the next 2 layers were actually in great shape. They weren't hardly rusty at all. Of course, some of it was galvanized steel, which would probably help a little bit with that. So, but anyway, yeah, it's I'm happy with how that turned out. I mean, of course, you know, the worst part is this part here, trying to get it to look right. But who's going to look in a fender well? So as long as I get it sealed up, watertight, dust tight, I will be happy. And then, of course, the next thing was to tackle the engine bay. You can tell that it was quite a mess after the fire. It had a good hood in the back, and so I just left the old hood on until I had a chance to work on things. So I just started this just a few weeks ago, really. So yeah, a lot of cleaning, scrubbing. So I basically just used Dawn dishwashing soap, or Dawn Platinum dishwashing soap. Kind of diluted in some sprayer there, and then I use these Buddies scrub pads. Got those at the dollar store. I went through like a pack of those. It really wasn't too bad. There's like the last one I was using. You can still see the yellow paint on it. So again, I did some test sprays with the paint. Here's a firewall. There's actually 3 layers of paint on there, or 3 patches of paint on there. You got the original firewall yellow. You got a really bright yellow, which again is when I was testing. The same on the hood. It's just, it was way too bright. And then there's one which is what I painted the hood. So firewall is probably pretty close to what the original paint was, because it hasn't had time to sunbake. So again, I went with it. I was happy with it. So after scrubbing, went ahead and covered the motor, started painting. So masked everything off, started painting. Worked with a few little tricks I learned in learning, you know, watching some painting videos on how to not create tape seams and you know, proper distance and stuff like that, which is kind of hard when you're painting an engine bay, because you got some really tight areas that you can't, you know, just trying to spray anything from a distance. So I did get a few runs, but I mean, considering the painting hassle, I think it turned out too bad. And even though I got some runs in there, there are factory runs in this engine bay that are not mine. Like, well, right, that one right there, that's a factory paint run. So yeah, I'm not too concerned about it. But well, I actually thought it turned out pretty decent. Again, this isn't a show truck. We're just trying to get it presentable and back on the road. I'm pretty happy with it. So basically, the engine bay's done. I got new hinges because the old hinges, the springs got so hot, they basically are not springy anymore. One wasn't springy at all, and the other one had some spring, but not near enough to keep the hood open. But yeah, I just cleaned these yesterday. I was hoping to get them done this weekend, but I've been using OSPO, which is a rust converter on everything. I did the same thing with the engine bay. Before I painted it, I went through it, and after I'd scrubbed it, went ahead and coated everything with OSPO. And the OSPO is supposedly supposed to be a good primer base for water or oil-based paints. So cross your fingers on that, because seems like every time I paint something, it always chips and peels. So get the hood back on next weekend. That brings us to the last thing that's happened. So we did manage to get the dash out, and I heard horror stories about getting these bolts out along the window. I guess apparently a lot of them get a lot of rust in there, and they're just kind of a booger. They're a pain to get to anyway, because you know it's got such a small area. And the actual procedure is to remove the windshield to get to the bolts so you can take the dash out. Well, I didn't really want to do that because I didn't want water and stuff getting in the truck. Same thing with that. The engine bay being open is I don't really like it being open. It can rain. But yeah, didn't want to deal with that in here. So basically the fire didn't cook it as bad as I had originally thought. I don't know if you can see that in the video or not. I mean, it turned it brown. I mean, some of that was already there before. So we're going to clean all that up. I'm going to have to reseal all this seams here. I got to clean out these vents. They're like packed full of garbage. I had already cleaned this one out once before. The other one you can't really get to too easily because the emergency brake's in the way. So it is packed full of stuff. I'm surprised these things haven't rotted out, but it's still good and solid. So, and then the dash, more cleaning, scrubbing, and then I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do with the dash, the vinyl on the dash. If I'm just gonna try and do another dash overlay, or if I'm going to maybe just convert it to the steel dash. There's holes in it because they put the vinyl on it, but I have ideas for that as well. So anyway, that'll be a subject for another video at some point. So once I get this firewall taken care of and the dash, yeah, I do have some holes in the floor, nothing major. Luckily nothing in the corners, so I will address that as well. I'm really liking that 3M panel adhesive, so I might just get a hood patch and we'll call it good. Don't have anything on the other side. The other side's still in great shape, so and I thought this side was in good shape, and I started poking around and I found little holes and stuff. So I figured it's probably time for a patch. And of course, it's been leaking from under here, and that's what led to this. I've seen water running down this firewall since I've taken everything out. Then it's raining outside, so, and of course it pools right here. So we'll get that hopefully taken care of. Got some ideas on that too, so stay tuned until the rest of the floorboards are in great shape. A little bit of surface rust, but no rot out. Now anyway, stay tuned for more updates later. Thanks for watching.